Hello and welcome to the first episode of the second season of The Tigers Down Under. I'm joined by Logan.
How you going?
And we've not really got a whole lot to cover, I don't think. I don't think a whole lot's happened in the time we've been away. Obviously, we've got a bit to talk about. Playoff final first and foremost, and then we'll get into the main off-season dramas. I'll start, obviously, with the playoff final and how you found it and how you felt watching it as Mo Diami's goal went in.
I don't think I was able to enjoy almost a minute of the game up until Mo Diami's goal went in. Just because of the flow of the play, it was just had that typical City feel about it, where we can dominate a team so much and still just look so vulnerable at times. You just had that feeling that although and in saying that, there was still a resolute kind of feel to our defence, but you just always wondered when Sheffield were going to get when they were going to get their breakthrough. So when Diami's goal went in, I think it was more of a relief than anything. Obviously, encompassed with the euphoric feelings of we could actually be going up now. It wasn't until that drop that we were able to kind of sit back and enjoy the last part of the game. I dare say.
It was quite funny because it is one of those games where the more chances we had, the more nervous I actually felt, because it felt like with every chance we threw away, the more likelihood there was that Wednesday were going to get the goal and actually win the match. I guess the ones that stick in my mind are probably the Robertson miss at the start of the second half.
Yeah, on such a great ball from Odebajo too. It just looked like there was no way he could have missed, and he didn't just miss. He flew it into space. It was incredible.
And probably the other big one was Diami in the first half, where he just pretty much strolled through the Wednesday defence and smashed it into the upright. And from the angle of the cameras, I actually thought it was going in, and it was pretty brutal when it actually ended up missing.
Yeah, indeed. And it was such a shock that he was able to continue his run as far as he did. And then to see him get the shot off from such a strong position, it was incredible to watch. You're not really used to seeing Mo Diami glide past players like that. It was fantastic.
And then obviously the main threat for Wednesday was Forestieri, but I've got to be honest, I mean, after the first half, he didn't really seem to get into the game a whole lot. I know he won a few fouls on the edge of the area in the first half, and I think he might have got one or two at the start of the second half. And I was actually quite worried when Dawson got that yellow card quite early on in the game that it could lead to something a bit risky for us. But I think Davies, especially in the second half, had a brilliant tackle on, I think it was on Forestieri, but we didn't really see too much of him.
No, that's exactly right. And we spoke about it previously about Forestieri being their number one threat. And as you mentioned, Alex, Dawson and Davies did a fantastic job on him for the most part, and kept him relatively quiet, which was exactly what we called for.
And so then, who would you say was man of the match? I mean, obviously Diami with the goal was incredibly significant, but would you give it to him, or was there a player who stood out above him?
Yeah, Diami on that merit, you're right. The goal, obviously, that's what the game will be remembered for. But I probably would say maybe Dawson or Davies. I thought defensively we just looked, we looked as good as we could, and so probably one of those two really stood out for me.
Yeah, I think that Davies tackle that I mentioned just before is almost as important as that Diami goal for mine, just because it just looked like such a good opportunity for Wednesday, and the way that he got his body around and took the ball without conceding the penalty was brilliant work, and I think that gave us that confidence to hold on to our 1-0 lead through the match. Moving on then from the pleasant memories of Wembley, and there were some ramifications from the game that we can chat about. Primarily, of course, that being the potential takeover of the club by the US consortium or the Thais or the Chinese or whoever else it was going to be, because there were obviously quite a few groups linked in the weeks after Wembley. I know you've been overseas for a bit, but have you been following the news about the takeover talks, and what have you made of them, especially the news most recently that the talks have basically broken down?
Yeah, I think it's probably typical of the Allams in many respects that you kind of you look for, or you kind of look for ways to like them because you respect how much they have done for the club initially. But just when it seems that there's an easy solution and something's going to be done and they're going to make the right call, there seems to be another blip in the radar. And obviously, it's kind of confusing because you've got, on one hand, the Alums saying that they're ready for the club to be sold to the right bidder. And from the sounds of things, the promotion has obviously put the club in a much more sellable position. And you kind of struggle to understand now why, with all the rumoured kind of takeovers and potential takeover bids, how there isn't one that now kind of fits the bill. Like, if you look for the right time for the Alums to sell, seemingly this is the best opportunity they have to get out and recoup at least some of the money that they're kind of hoping to.
Well, and that's it. And I mean, a lot of the comments I've seen have actually kind of said this was basically their best opportunity to not only recoup their money, but to actually make a profit. Because I think I don't know what the current financial situation is. It may well have changed in the last 12 months, but I think the last time they released accounts, there was about a 70 or 80 million pound debt to the Alums. So if they were going to get about 100 million pounds, which was their asking price, that actually leaves them with a profit, which when you consider that they bought the club basically in administration, or on the verge of administration in 2010, to think that they could essentially recoup not only a 20 million profit, but that on top of the amount of money that they've actually put into the club. You'd have to say this is, as you say, this is their best opportunity. And we'll talk more about potential signings in a little bit and the nature of the budget in that. But you'd have to think the way things are going, that this is certainly the highest value that the club is going to have for at least the short term.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that's why it is such a puzzling situation that City fans with the club find themselves in. And the concerning thing for me is not so much that the fans have been left in the lurch, even though that is a big factor, but you've seen the interviews with Steve Bruce, and even from a managerial setting, he seems to be left in the dark on many of the issues too, which is kind of concerning when you consider how close the Premier League season is around the corner and the importance of mounting a challenge. A club like City really need to be on the ball as far as signing quality players and being able to make themselves competitive. So the closer it gets to the season and the longer this drags on, it's certainly a concerning time to a degree for all involved at Hull City.
Yeah, and I mean, I've certainly been vocal in the past about being prepared to say that perhaps Bruce has taken us as far as he can and perhaps we should look at a different manager going forward. But in the aftermath of Wembley and all of this uncertainty with the owners, I was actually looking at Bruce staying as a positive because he had said quite publicly that he would only stay if he had certain assurances about budget. And so I thought, well, look, if he's going to stay, that clearly shows that either the Alums or whoever's taking over the club are going to give him the money that he needs to strengthen the squad. And I thought, great, okay, he's committed to staying. That means that we've got this money available and we'll go on and strengthen. The thing that worries me now is that actually he committed to staying on the belief that this US consortium was going to take over. And I've heard figures thrown around, but there was a rumour that I think Burnsy might have said that the US consortium was prepared to give him a £50 million budget, which is obviously quite considerable and obviously something that would have convinced him to stay. So we'll talk about Bruce now and I guess as well being linked to the England job, and you have to wonder, even if he doesn't get the England job, whether he wants to stay at the club, whether he thinks that the budget the Alums are prepared to give him is competitive.
I do wonder about that. I also wonder what other opportunities would be available to Steve Bruce as far as managing a Premier League side, and I doubt that there would be any. So whilst on one hand you've got Bruce saying how he's not necessarily convinced that staying at Hull would be the right decision, although because he's been left out in the dark, it's not that he himself has expressed any negative feelings towards the club. In fact, he spoke so positively of being buoyed now that we were able to get out of the championship, and he's got kind of a renewed feeling towards the club. But you just wonder, is that England job or potential England spot the kind of get out of jail free card? And if it is, I worry that if the Alums do stay on board, Steve Bruce seems to be the only person that can deal with the Alums at the moment. Yeah. And if we were to lose him, it'd be very, very interesting times indeed.
Yeah, especially, and it's a good point that this is probably his best opportunity to manage Premier League football at this stage. I wonder if his record of getting clubs out of the Championship would tempt someone like, dare I say, Leeds, or someone like that, early season sacking in a Championship club, whether they try and tempt him across, and whether he has that hunger to try with a new club to get out of the Championship. He may well be kind of burnt out of promoting clubs out of the Championship, because it's obviously quite a stressful process, but that may well be his main avenue to another job if he isn't offered the England job. I wonder as well whether he would be prepared just to take on some sort of advisory role with England or anything like that. That would mean a fresh start, a fresh job, and something to kind of revitalise him, because I just get the sense that the club these days is such a draining place to be around, and must be such a worrying place to be.
Yeah, that's exactly the feeling that you seem to be getting. What I do 100% believe though is Steve Bruce is happy with the core of players in the nucleus that he has got at Hull, and seems to show a lot of belief in them. Even more so, like with the way that he's re-signed Huddleston and El Mohammadi, it instantly kind of shows the faith that he has in those two. And they're probably players that we've spoken about at times being past it or kind of not being able to pull their weight. So for Steve Bruce to have faith in players such as them kind of speaks volumes to me that I don't know how many additions Steve Bruce actually believes he would need to stay up. Obviously, we know that it'd be close to around about 6 or 7. But I think he's pretty happy with the core players, and that kind of speaks volumes to me about him wanting to stay.
Yeah, and I guess we can move on and chat about the players. Obviously, as a group, we have a good set of players, but then obviously available players are much less because of a number of really unfortunate injuries that we've experienced during pre-season training, and then even during the games in the last few days. I think we've got McGregor out for up to 6 months with his back injury, Odebajo out for up to 6 months with his dislocated kneecap, Bruce with his Achilles out for 4 to 6 months. Dawson went off this morning against Mansfield, I think it was, with knee ligament damage, and then Maguire, Livermore with ankle knocks, and Huddleston with an Achilles injury. So I think Maguire, Livermore and Huddleston should be relatively short-term injuries. I think from what I've heard, it's going to be, they're just sort of training ground injuries. Dawson hopefully is not more than a couple of weeks, but it is really starting to get quite concerning, and I understand Bruce and Ehab met the other day to draw up some transfer targets because of these injuries. We've obviously been linked with a couple of players in the last few days as well, but what's your sense or feeling about the playing group and the injuries that we've sustained and what we kind of need to do to cover them?
Yeah, I think Moses Odebajo is probably the biggest one that stands out for me, just purely because of kind of the form that he was in, particularly in the playoff final as well. But that last run, he was just blistering. He was really flying for us, and he was someone who I feel would just be itching at the chance to and would really relish his time in the Premier League. We also, Harry Maguire probably had his breakthrough season in many ways as well in the Championship, despite probably not playing as many games as we would have hoped. But he's it's very easy to see him becoming a fan favourite in the not too distant future. So we have those two, particularly our younger players, are concerned. It almost feels like Michael Dawson's due for 2 or 3 injuries first. As it is. So losing him is still massive as far as the leadership role that he offers. But yeah, obviously Alex Bruce McGregor probably leads us to have to head into the market for another keeper. There's we're probably going to need to buy a keeper to answer the question. As far as the midfield goes, I definitely think that we need a little bit more quality, and obviously another striking partner for Hernandez that is proven. Are probably the 3 biggest targets that I'm looking for at the moment.
So obviously in terms of rumours of potential signings and players that even beyond rumours, players that we've actually been confirmed to be talking to and offering contracts to. Obviously, there's Robson Kanu, who's done quite well for Wales at the Euros, but was released by Reading after last season, so he seems to be a bit of a mixed bag. There's Lamine Sané, who seems to be quite close to joining from France. He can play anywhere across the back four or even as a defensive midfielder. Peter Odemwingie, who's been on trial with us and played against Mansfield this morning, and apparently looked not too bad after initial reactions to him were a bit mixed. And then the latest name I've seen linked in terms of keepers, and after talking about the playoff final, is Kieran Westwood, who's available for a £2 million release clause. And then also Gunter, who's the right back from Reading as well, with a release clause that we've been interested in activating. So, I mean, those seem to be the 5 key players that we're kind of, the names are sort of circling at the moment. So what do you make of them?
Yeah, I thought Peter Odemwingie is a difficult one, a 35-year-old striker. Whilst he might offer something as a rotation or squad player, you probably, if you're hinging your hopes on him staying up, your season's looking extremely concerning. But again, I have no problem with him trialling, the other signings, Westwood would definitely be a considered factor. I think he would offer us a lot. But again, nothing really there kind of stands out that shows the kind of intent that I think the fans are like just begging for after the promotion.
So we'll have to wait and see. I think Bruce has said that he's hoping we can make a few signings in the next 3 or 4 days, but obviously he's also going to find out in the next week whether he gets the England job. So I think it's going to be a very interesting week to be around the club at the moment, because I think a lot could happen and a lot could change quite quickly. Moving to on the field, and obviously the fixture list was released a little bit over a month ago, I think. And it handed us pretty much the hardest possible start we could ask for, especially at home, where we start off against the champions. And then I think our next 3 or 4 home games, we've got United, we've got Arsenal, we've got Chelsea, and then it becomes a bit easier against Stoke. But we've also got Liverpool away from home in amongst that as well. So it's a pretty tough start back in the top flight, but I mean, these are the sort of games that we dream about and hope for when we're down in the Championship. We look at Leicester and say, we beat them in the League Cup, so why not get a run at them in the league and see how we go against them? But what are your thoughts, and what do you make of this set of fixtures?
Yeah, certainly a tough run, and I think that's probably one of the major factors that it's kind of got so much unrest, or allowed so much unrest around the club with the fans, because as the season draws closer, having such a difficult run to start, we know the importance of getting points before Christmas. And Steve Bruce, we know from the time that he's been in charge of the club, he's one of those managers that targets games and targets kind of time in the season where he expects to pick up a certain amount of points. Looking at those first few fixtures, as you mentioned, with the squad that's currently available, you wouldn't give us much hope at all. So, I think it's very important that some signings get made quickly. And, like you said, it's going to be an interesting run. They are the games that you dream about. They're going to be a very tough set of fixtures. Leicester on the first day, I think, is brilliant. I still, and it's a strange thing to say. We watched Leicester just play incredibly last year and win the league, and there's still a disbelief that they were able to do so. But I still can see us somehow turning them over on the first day.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And like you said, you look at your clubs like your Manchester United, and I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how they face up with how different.
At the KC, yeah.
That's it. And it's going to be interesting times for them. Everyone thought Chelsea were going to be a powerhouse last season, and they obviously didn't produce. So whilst on paper those fixtures look very frightening, you would never bet against us, I would say.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, it's going to be great to play Leicester on the opening day, and I do think we can get something against them. I mean, despite all of this doom and gloom around the club, I think we've got to go into this with our heads up and a bit of optimism. And I think playing Leicester first up is probably the perfect time to get them. They've just lost Kante. I think they're going to lose their director of football or their talents, their scout in Walsh. So there's a little bit of, I wouldn't say unrest is probably the wrong word, but they're starting to lose a few of their players. I think Mahrez is being linked with a move away. Vardy may well be tempted to leave as well if those two are tempted away from Leicester. So there might be a chance to play them before they settle in some new signings to replace the outgoings. So we might be able to get them nice and early and really go at them. And it's interesting because even though they are Premier League champions, you have to think their squad as a whole and their depth probably doesn't match up to a Man United or a Man City. So it's a different sort of Premier League champion in that sense. Obviously their game style worked really well last season against a lot of the Premier League teams, but you know you can't go into any game, especially against Leicester or anyone like that, and kind of give it up before it even starts. And I really hope that we do go at them from the start of the game and we can try and get something out of it.
Yeah, certainly. I couldn't agree more.
So I guess I'll say with the fixtures, I mean, by the end of September we'll have played Leicester, Swansea, United, Burnley, Arsenal and Liverpool. So what would be a pass mark from your point of view in terms of points?
A very good question. I'd love to see around 7 to 9. I'm going to say.
Okay, fair enough. So hopefully that would be wins against Swansea and Burnley, I suppose, and then a couple of draws if we can grab them.
Yeah.
We'll see how we go.
Beating Burnley is always a large concern.
Yeah, well, exactly. I have a feeling we were actually the last team to beat them because I think we beat them on Boxing Day at home, and they didn't lose a league game after that. So I suspect they will have lost a game by the start of September, but if not, it could be quite an interesting one.
Yeah. Now Diame. Oh, Diame!
To finish off with, we'll try and finish on a positive note, and I guess because this is sort of also a review of last season, as we didn't manage to do one a bit any earlier than this. I'll start with looking back on last season and what your favourite memory or favourite match or player or anything like that from last season was.
Favourite match would be the 3-0 win over Burnley. I think it was around Christmas time, Boxing Day. No, yeah.
I think it was Boxing Day. Yeah.
Boxing Day, yeah. That game was probably the one that stood out for me, just because you never really expect to beat Burnley as a City fan, and so that kind of really, in many ways at that time, put our credentials forward, and you really had that feeling that we were going to kick on with it. So that game really stood out for me. Player of the season last year for me, it probably has to be Hernandez. Obviously, the signs of Sam Clucas coming through as a young player and Josh Tymon's debut as well, they stood out. But as far as the season completely goes, I think Hernandez with his goal return, which I probably wasn't expecting, for me was definitely our most crucial player.
How do you think he'll get on in the Premier League this season?
I think he'll do much better than the first time around. I think he's, whilst I'm not expecting him to have a 20-goal return or anything like that, I think that he can definitely pinch kind of 10 or 12. I think he's adjusted to English football much better now, I dare say, and I think he'll be a threat.
Yeah, hope so as well. Probably from my point of view, the 3-0 win over Borough probably stands out as well as, I mean, for similar reasons to the Burnley game, I guess, and I think it was around the same time. It might have been a few weeks beforehand, but yeah, just one of those games where you go into it as a City fan, and I guess you always think it's a bit of a tough game, and you never know what to expect. So a 3-0 win's nice and comfortable, and really sort of gave us a lot of optimism and a sense of hope for the season. The other one that really stood out was the 6-0 against Charlton. I always love a good 6-0 win, as you and I both experienced over there against Fulham. But yeah, I mean, Hernandez getting a hat-trick, it's been, I think, since 2012 or 2013, where I think Matt Fry might have got a hat-trick, but it's been a long time coming, so that was great to see. In terms of players, as you've said, yeah, Hernandez is the big one. Player of the season, by a mile with that goal return, which is such a rare sight for a City team to have a striker doing so well. Odebajo as well as another one who came on really well over the course of the season, and someone you touched on earlier was Harry Maguire, who also had a real breakout season for the team. So it was great to see both of them coming on in leaps and bounds. And then for this season upcoming, what are you most looking forward to? Whether that's Pep Guardiola coming to the KC and seeing how we can knock them off, or whether it's Ibra at the KC, or whether it's seeing someone like a Greg Lua maybe getting a chance in the team. From a City point of view, what are you most looking forward to?
Yeah, I think you probably touched on a few of there's definitely a lot of there's star power in the Premier League that you will see those big occasions. As far as what I'm looking forward to the most, will probably be the Liverpool at the KC is always a good one. Usually because we're a very very good fighting chance, and I know a lot of my friends that are Liverpool fans themselves always pencil that fixture in against Hull because they consider it a very dangerous one. So that's always been a favourite in the last couple of years. So hopefully we continue our good form against them.
Yeah, I think certainly it was a good season to get promoted because there are obviously a lot of high-profile managers now managing in the Premier League. So seeing us play against Jurgen Klopp, Pep Guardiola, Mourinho, Conte, all of those will be really fascinating to watch. And yeah, I mean, we talk about the need to make these signings and bringing all of these players in. And I guess the silver lining, if we don't make a lot of those signings, and what I touched on just before with Lua, is maybe we will see some of these younger guys getting a go in the Premier League. Whether or not they're ready, I don't know. I guess we'll wait and see. I mean, there's only one way to find out. But I mean, Tymon played at the Emirates last season in the FA Cup and didn't really look out of place. I mean, I thought he'd be quite overwhelmed by the occasion, but he really played quite well as a 16-year-old. So whether it's a Greg Lua or a Greg Ollie or someone like that, I think Jared Bowen got the goal this morning against Mansfield. So we do seem to have a lot of promising youngsters starting to come through into the team. So I would really love to see at least one or two of them make their Premier League debuts and see how they go, because as we'll remember, back in 2010 we had Mark Cullen and Will Atkinson, I think it was, who had a few games in the Premier League for us. So, and I think Cullen even scored against Wigan late in the season. So it's always exciting to see those youngsters get a go and to see how they can play against the big teams. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be such an unknown quantity this season, given all of the unrest off the field at the moment. So where do you see us finishing up? Do you see us surviving or struggling at this stage?
I think I'll reserve judgment until perhaps the next podcast.
Fair enough.
Over the next few weeks when we see what kind of signings get made and whether the club gets sold and all the kind of outliers at the moment that we're waiting on. Once there's a clearer picture, I'll give my verdict on where I think we'll sit. But I think we'll stay up. I'm pretty confident. We've got a good record of staying up the first season, and then going down the second one. So I'm going to keep that trend going, and we should stay up.
And so then, in a couple of words, do you think Bruce will stay at the club for the start of the season?
I don't believe Bruce will get the England managerial position. I think it will leave him with no other choice but to stay at Hull and manage us through the Premier League.
And then after the transfer window closes, do you think the Allams will sell the club?
I'm going to say no, and only because everybody wants them to sell the club, and the Allams' history of doing exactly the opposite of what the fans want would suggest that Hull won't be getting sold, no.
And then finally, how many signings? Maybe you give me an over/under on 5 signings. Do you reckon we'll make more or less than 5 signings?
It'll be over. I think it'll probably be 5 permanent signings and then 1 or 2 loans.
Okay, very interesting. Well, thank you for joining me tonight. We've obviously had a lot to cover since the last podcast, so thank you for running the rule over all of the off-field and on-field goings-on.
No problems at all. Anytime.
And thank you everyone for listening in. We'll probably try and record another podcast a bit closer to the start of the season to preview our first game against Leicester, and then we'll be recording weekly after that to try and cover reviews of games and previews of the following week's game. So make sure to listen in and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can stay up to date with all of our podcasts. And until next time, come on City. You've been listening to the official Hull City Australia podcast. For more discussion, join us on Facebook in the Hull City AFC Australian Supporters Group, or follow us on Twitter at Hull City AFC Oz. The music was created by Amber and Black.
Going higher and higher. There's no turning back.